Guys, welcome back to the channel. So in the last episode, we went ahead and got the cab mounted up onto the truck, and you can see everything there is looking pretty good. We got plenty of room underneath to pass our drive shaft and all sorts of fun stuff like that. But in this episode, what we are going to work on is expanding this guy out a little farther. We're going to work on the hot side turbo system here and work on the stand and get that sort of mocked up. And then hopefully later in the episode, we're going to lift this engine up into the front of the truck, set it down, and see exactly where our motor mounts need to be in order to clear the firewall. If it's satisfactory, hopefully we don't have to cut the firewall, but we'll see. But now we're gonna move to the turbo piping. Okay guys, so I wanna show you sort of what's going on here. The headers are a 3-inch collector, and we're gonna put a turn down on here with an expansion bellow like this. And the turn downs are going to go down to our turbos, and we are going to use a 2.5 to 3 inch adapter here, and then this is our turbo flange here. So that's sort of how that's still going to stack up. We also need to drill and tap and put a 1/8 inch MPT bung in here so that we can run some pressure measurements in the header. And we also need to cut here our wastegate tubing. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually chuck this up on the drill press and poke a hole in it here with our 2-inch Lennox hole saw, get that cut out, and then I think we can get to welding. So let's get this thing up on the drill press. Well, that went terribly. So I tried cutting it, and as soon as the thing touched it, grabbed and pulled it off to the side. So you see I put a pretty good gash in this. What we're gonna do instead is I am printing out on the 3D printer where's my mouse at? We're gonna print out a little coping guide here, and we're gonna go old school and cut this out with an abrasive disc and some carbide with some hand tools. I'll cut it out and just sort of ream it to fit. And we're gonna try that instead because, well, frankly, it didn't go great. So that's what I'm gonna go do. Try that, and then maybe we can save this piece. Hopefully that is in the perimeter of that cutout. If it's not, I'll just save this for later. I can cut it into a 45 or something like that, and I'll just get another tube. But I guess what we'll do now is we'll just start welding all the other flange pieces and try to get those things ready to go. Okay, so while I'm waiting for the 3D prints to get done, I'm gonna go ahead and just start tacking this stuff up and maybe weld some of the flanges up. I got a little bit of gas left. Probably weld today until I'm out of gas, and then tomorrow I'll pick up another bottle. So let's get started on this. So half decent here. I got the, these are the turbo flanges, and they're actually the inside. See if this is still hot. No, it's okay. Oop, a little warm. So I didn't weld the outside yet because I'm going to purge the inside, but I wanted to seal the inside up here, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's going. I'm running about 35 cubic feet per minute, or I'm sorry, cubic feet per hour of argon, and that seems to be just enough to get like a decent color. I know there's a lot of staining and stuff like that, but I'm not particularly worried about the color and the staining as much as I am, say, like sugaring. But this is also a blind weld, so nothing's protruding through the backside. These are almost like a press fit, so I'm not particularly worried. So what I did was I wrapped the aluminum around the outside to try to seal up the outside edge of the press fit, and then just burned it in, and then hopefully the argon gas will flow down into the crack enough. I'm running like a little bit of pre-flow and a little bit of post-flow, so there shouldn't be much sugar underneath that weld. But when we weld the outside and seal this joint up, we will want to run a purge through the fittings, obviously. Now, I'm gonna keep welding here, but we're getting down to the end. So I'm gonna finish this bottle out, and hopefully I can catch it before it goes, and keep tacking all the rest of these parts together. And then I don't know if we'll get to purging stuff today and welding it solid, but we'll probably at least get it set up. So get on the move. Okay guys, so I got them both welded up, but I have to show you something in the spirit of transparency. So this one was welded up. This one here is just the little flange welded up to the flex coupling. You'll see here, this one's cut apart. This one was a flange, a 1-inch spacer, and the flex coupling. And the reason I did that is the head on this side is recessed 1 inch back. This side is 1 inch forward. What I did not realize is they already accounted for that in the headers, and it was just an optical illusion that made me think that it was offset back. It is not actually offset back. It is the same protrusion out from the face of the engine. So I screwed up. So that one's getting cut apart. I'm gonna try to save the flex coupler, or the flex bellow. Try to save that guy, but this flange isn't gonna survive multiple weldings. So I ordered a new flange, I ordered a new flex coupler, because it's going to be front and center visually, so I want to have a fresh one so it doesn't look like it's been reworked. And I'll save this guy for like underneath the truck if we need, like, you know, some sort of thermal expansion. Say we want to put test pipes in it or something like that, we can use something like that to allow a little bit of flex. So yeah, that's what happened, but I'll be waiting on parts to finish that one up. But in the meantime, we're going to move forward with finishing out this piece. Okay, so a couple minutes ago, we talked about this guy, and what this is this is a template that I used to trace out our cuts on our elbows. So this elbow here is gonna have the wastegate coming out the side, and I want direct flow. So what happens is like this, and the flow will come directly out of this and be basically priority gas flow to the wastegates, which is always a good idea. So I already did one of these, and what I did was I cut it with a it's like a 3-inch grinding wheel over here, just one of those little guys, and sort of segment cut it into the general shape. And then I used a carbide burr and just sort of cleaned it up as I went and got it real fitted up nice. After that, what I did is I stuck the tube through that guy and measured it all up. Actually traced it onto this tube, then cut this tube to fit, and now it fits in pretty nice. So I got it flipped the wrong direction, it goes this way. And you can see here that everything fits lovely. So what we're gonna do now is I'm going to get all the components together, and I'm going to stitch them up, mask everything off, and then hopefully weld it solid. So that's what we're gonna get ready to do now. Okay, I'm gonna call that a night, not because I'm done. I got about halfway around this and everything was looking great, and all of a sudden there's just this huge puff and awful smell, burns your lungs. And what it was the tube, I cut it off, but the end of the tube started to melt inside of this elbow because it's getting too hot in there. So I'm not gonna do this anymore. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go get like some copper or stainless tubing at like Lowe's or Home Depot or something. Just cut off some hard, like, I don't know, brake line or something, and use that to stick in the thing and just like hose clamp it to that. So I'm gonna call it a night now. I'll go to the hardware store in the morning. It was welding beautifully. I'm super happy with that. And then all of a sudden, give yourself lung cancer. It's awful. So just gonna stop here while we're ahead, fix the issue, and come back tomorrow. Okay, so I got a little 1/4-inch OD soft copper tube, shoved it in there. It's actually fits so good that I don't need to do any like hose clamps or seals or anything. It shoves in pretty tight. So this will keep the hose from catching on fire and, you know, smoking me out. So let's get back to work. So went ahead and welded up most of the parts here. Got this all welded together. I need to weld the coupling yet to this tube. But one thing I noticed is it's really easy. You can't see some of the spots here. There's just little nicks that just from sitting on the table or things clanking around. So I got to be a lot more careful with these ceiling surfaces. Try not to scratch them up. It's sort of tough, but at the same time, it happens. I did take a little flappy disc on a arbor and went in there and sort of cleaned up any overhang and stuff like that, and just sort of took it down to the weld, not to the weld inside, but you can see the weld inside, and just try to minimize the flow disturbances and stuff like that. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna re-tape it all back up and then burn this last seam in, and then this one is done. At that point, I need to wait for my replacement bellow here to replace that one, and then we'll get to making the other side. So, not too bad. Okay, so we got this all welded up nice and pretty. I'm happy with it. What's gonna come up next here is I drilled a hole. This is on the underside of the header here, and this is going to be our pre-turbo pressure measurement. So I'm gonna weld a little 1/8 inch MPT bung here inside of this piece here, and then we'll run a capillary tube, a steel capillary tube, to like a firewall mounted pressure transducer that's away from the heat, and that will provide our pressure to our ECU so that we can log pre-turbo and post-turbo pressures on both sides. So we'll have, we'll just have it on this one side, on the one bank, and then we'll just have that to evaluate, and hopefully we can gather some information there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel this guy or cope it, get it all situated, and tack this in place. Okay guys, so this is all welded up, but I'm not going to call it complete per se. One thing, it got away from me here. So when I laid this out in the CAD, this radius was slightly shorter, and one of the big things is the headers that I drew up. We swapped headers out and we went with these Speed Engineering headers. They're pretty nice for what they are, but they're almost about 2 inches longer than what I was originally anticipating on running. And what happens is now the wastegate flange is 2 inches out farther than what I originally intended. And then the wastegates that I ordered are also larger than the model. So they stick way out like an extra 1.5 inches. So what happens is you start getting way out in front here, and we're gonna get into the rad support area of the truck. So we're gonna have to tweak this a little bit. I'm not going to modify anything yet because I need to put it into the truck, which I probably shouldn't have done in the first place, but hey, what are you gonna do? So we're gonna get this thing mocked up into the truck next, and then sort of figure out which way the turbos need to be canted. I like to save all of this if I can, because that'd be a disaster if I had to remake it. But what we'll end up doing is getting this situated, and then we're probably gonna cut this and then go with a really tight radius pie cut or something like that, and get the wastegates pointed inward. And that's gonna take like 6 inches off the front of the engine package here. It should make fitting things a lot easier. The only problem that we're gonna have is, one, we have to clear the dry sump. The alternator is gonna be about here, and the frame rails, so the inner or the outer frame horn for the coilovers is right here. And then the frame rails are coming through down here and kicking down. So we need to make sure we have turbo clearance for the frame rails. Basically, we need to make sure we can get this thing packaged and fitted. Now, they're mirror image turbos. I'd like to keep everything perfectly symmetrical. That is the goal. And that's what we're gonna try to achieve. I'm pretty confident I will cut this back up if needed in order to keep it mirror image, because I think that's part of the coolness of the build, is trying to keep everything mirror image. So we'll get started on sort of mocking this thing up and try to sit it in the engine bay, and then see what we're working with. Okay, so what I did is I got the engine sort of prepped here, and just sort of took any spots that are potentially like rub points and masked them off with some cardboard or whatever. And we're gonna go ahead and get the truck situated far to the left-hand side, and then try to lift the engine up into its position. I already kind of know that this isn't gonna fit, but I wanna see where the contact points are and how much I'm gonna need to take off to get the engine where I want it. In my measurements, I have basically 15.5 inches from the back of the front cross member to the back of the block is what I'm gonna try to achieve. And Generally speaking, the block should clear, but you have the transmission adapter and the transmission itself, the bell housing on the transmission, so that might get a little tight. And then there's also some question of whether or not these headers are going to be an issue, because the way the firewall kicks out sort of wraps around where those headers would be. But we're going to get it lifted up, sort of get it mocked up into position with my dad, and see how much we need to do. If we need to do a lot of cutting, I'm going to mark it off and brace the cab with some of this cheap tubing over there and get it mocked up, and then we'll brace it and start cutting the cab, I guess. So get started on this, and we'll go from here. Okay, so we got the engine up off the stand and on the cherry picker here, and I just wanted to show you guys what we got in the mail. I forgot to tell you about it, but this is our dual clutch transmission adapter for an LS or LTX engine. So this bad boy here is set up that we can hook it up to any F series or E series 2010 and up BMW dual clutch transmission or LS. So this will work for LS's, LTX's, small block Chevys and big block Chevys. They all work. So it does the trick. Really nice piece. But what we're going to do is we're going to mount it up and mask the hell out of it to try to keep it in good shape, because it's probably going to get banged against some stuff here when we try to mock everything up. So we'll put it on, mask it up, and try to be careful. Okay, so this is the situation. We got the engine set up in here, which was a fun ordeal. My Harbor Freight freaking cherry picker is bleeding off like something terrible. I'm not sure if the pump's bad or if I just gotta bleed it or what, but it's really bleeding down pretty bad. We're back tight against the firewall. I have to take a measurement, but I presume we need to go at least another 1.5 inches back to get where we wanna go. And generally speaking, side clearances, front clearances, everything looks great. We got plenty of shearing shaft clearance and everything like that. So we're doing good. The main thing we need to do now is mark the firewall and brace the cab. We're gonna brace the cab first with a tube across it. We're gonna mark the firewall, and then we're gonna cut it. Then we're gonna shove it back even further. So there's no going back now. This is kind of one of those deals where you got to commit. So we're going to brace the cab up and go from there. Okay, so we're getting ready to cut here. I did all my checks, measurements. The engine's sitting at like 3 degrees back, which is a little bit more than what we want. We want to shoot for about 1.5 to 2, but that's okay because right now it's just touching. Overall, all the clearances seem pretty good. I needed to check the harmonic balancer. That's probably going to be a little iffy with like a big truck size balancer. We might need to go to like a Corvette balancer with a smaller pulley. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get ready to cut the cab. So I cut this tube out, and we're going to basically grind some of the steel back here, tack this in place, and brace it up, and then get ready to cut the firewall. We just want to make sure that we support this and keep the whole cab from caving in when I cut the center section right here out of the firewall, so we don't have any collapse. So that's what we're going to do now. Well, we got her cut out, so you can see what we did was we followed the body line here on the cab, which is a little bit more space than what we need, but really not. You can see the headers here, when they come back 1.5 inches, it's going to be pretty close to that hole. So what we'll do is we're going to work on getting the engine in place now exactly where it needs to be, and then I will get some measurements for the motor mounts, where the motor mounts need to go in the chassis. Then we'll pull the engine out. I'll build the motor mounts, get this whole thing done, and we will sit the engine back in. So looking good. Okay guys, it's the next day. We got the engine out. I went ahead and designed up the motor mounts. They're gonna come in from the side here, brought yay far. And we're gonna get to tigging those up right now. I already ran them off on the plasma cutter, which you can see over here. And the basic design, like I said, they come off the side of the frame rail like that. And then on this little flat sits these guys here. And this is where the Heim stud will come down and sit. So we got 3 different positions, half an inch offset in each direction, just in case we need to shift some things. But that's what we got. So I'm gonna go ahead and start tigging these up and we'll go from here. Ta-da! So this is the motor mount. These guys will be welded into the side of the frame. The frame will go here and here, obviously flip around the other direction. So they turned out pretty good. I'm gonna call it a day for now. Try tomorrow. I'll get everything measured out on the frame here and we'll get it welded up. All right, guys. So you just saw us get the engine up and mounted in, and you can see the motor mounts here. We got the rod end, everything supported and bolted in solid. So this worked out pretty well for us. Right now, the engine's sitting level in both planes, which is going to be fine for now. That's a worst case scenario for clearance. So this is good to go. In the next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to get that transmission bracket, the adapter plate mounted up on this, and start working on cutting out our tunnel to mount our DCT transmission and mount our transmission cross member. But for now, it's in and we're good to go. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. Until next time.